Hi, and welcome to Billerica Public Library's Book Buzz. My name is Marion, and I'm the Public Service Librarian here at the library. I hope that you enjoy listening to some of our March releases that our library has purchased for our patrons' pleasure. Take some time to drop in and check out a great book. Our first genre this month is contemporary fiction. The Phone Booth at the Edge of the World by Laura Massini. When Yu loses her mother and her daughter in the tsunami, she begins to mark passage of time from the date onward. Everything is relative to March 11, 2011, the day the tsunami tore Japan apart, and when grief took hold of her life. Yu struggles to continue on, alone with her pain. Then one day she hears about a man who has an old disused telephone booth in his garden. There, those who have lost loved ones find the strength to speak to them and begin to come to terms with their grief. As news of the phone booth spreads, people travel to it from miles around. Soon, Yu makes her own journey to the phone booth too. But once there, she cannot bring herself to speak into the receiver. Instead, she finds Takeshi, a bereaved husband whose own daughter has stopped talking in the wake of her mother's death. Her Hair by Amanda Dennis. Dennis has written a wonderfully personal account of a daughter coming to terms with the loss of her mother, and a mother coming to terms with the loss of her daughter. As Elena learns about Ella's last days, the richly imagined narrative moves back and forth between Paris and Thailand. Elena struggling with memory loss due to a trauma that has unmoored her sense of self, deserts graduate school in a long-term relationship to accept a bizarre proposition from an estranged family friend in Paris. She will search for a young woman, Ella, who went missing 6 years earlier in Thailand, by rewriting her journals. As she delves deeper into Ella's story, Elena begins to lose sight of her own identity and drift dangerously towards self-annihilation. Silence is a Sense by Layla Alama. A young woman sits in her apartment, watching the small daily dramas of her neighbors across the way. She is an outsider, mute, safe behind her windows, and she sees it all. The sex, the fights, the happy and unhappy families. Leaving from her war-torn Syrian homeland to this unnamed British city has traumatized her into silence, and her only connection to the world is the column she writes for a magazine under the name The Voiceless, where she tries to explain the refugee experience without revealing anything about herself. Gradually, though, the boundaries of her world expand. She ventures to the corner store, to a bookstore, a laundromat, to a gathering at a nearby mosque. But it isn't long before she finds herself involved in her neighbors' lives. When an anti-Muslim hate crime rattles the neighborhood, she has to make a choice. Will she remain a voiceless observer or become an active participant in a community that, despite her best efforts, is quickly becoming her own? Float Plan by Trish Dollar. After a reminder goes off for the Caribbean sailing trip Anna was supposed to take with her fiancé, she impulsively goes to sea in a sailboat he left her, intending to complete the voyage alone. But after a treacherous night's sail, she realizes she can't do it by herself and hires Keen, a professional sailor, to help. Much like Anna, Keen is struggling with a very different future than the one he had planned. As romance rises with the tide, they discover that it's never too late to chart a new course. Raft of Stars by Andrew Graff. It's the summer of 1994 in Claypot, Wisconsin, and the lives of 10-year-old Fish, Brenson, and Dale Bredwin are shaped by two fathers they don't talk about. One night, tired of seeing his best friend bruised and terrorized by his no-good dad, Fish takes action. A gunshot rings out, and the two boys flee the scene, believing themselves murderers. They head for the woods, where they find their way onto a raft. But the natural terrors of Iron's Forge Gorge threatens to overwhelm them. Four adults track them into the forest, each one on a journey of his or her own. Fisher's mother, Miranda, a wise woman full of fierce faith, his granddad, Teddy, who knows the woods like the back of his hand, Tiffany, a purple haired gas station attendant and poet looking for connection, and Sheriff Carl, who's having doubts about life. Our second genre this month is historical fiction. Vera by Carol Edgerton. Meet Vera Johnson, the uncommonly resourceful 15-year-old illegitimate daughter of Rose, notorious proprietor of San Francisco's most legendary bordello and ally to the city's corrupt politicians. Vera has grown up straddling two worlds. The madam's alluring sphere, replete with tickets to the opera, surly henchmen, and scant morality, and the violent, debt-ridden domestic life of the family paid to raise her. On the morning of the Great Quake, Vera's worlds collide. As the shattered city burns and looters vie with the injured, orphan, and starving, Vera and her sister Pi are cast adrift. Vera disregards societal norms and prejudices and begins to imagine a new kind of life. She collaborates with Tan, her former rival, and forges an unlikely family of survivors. Together, they navigate their way beyond disaster. Liberty by Caitlin Greenridge. Coming of age as a free-born black girl in Reconstruction-era Brooklyn, Liberty Sampson is all too aware that her purposeful mother, a practicing physician, has a vision for their future together. Liberty is to go to medical school and practice alongside her. But Liberty, drawn more to music than science, feels stifled by her mother's choices and is hungry for something else. Is there really only one way to have a life? And she is constantly reminded that unlike her mother who can pass, Liberty has skin that is too dark. When a young man from Haiti proposes to Liberty and promises she will be his equal on the island, she accepts, only to discover that she is still subordinate to him and all men. And as she tries to parse what freedom actually means for a Black woman, Liberty struggles with where she might find it for herself and for generations to come. The Rose Code by Kate Quinn, 1940. As England prepares to fight the Nazis, three very different women answer the call to a mysterious country estate, Bletchley Park, where the best minds in Britain train to break German military codes. Vivacious debutante Ursula is a girl who has everything: beauty, wealth, and the dashing Prince Philip of Greece sending her roses. But she burns to prove herself as more than a society girl and puts her fluent German to use as a translator of decoded enemy secrets. Impetuous, self-made Mab, product of East End London poverty, works the legendary code-breaking machines as she conceals old wounds and looks for a socially acceptable husband. Both Ursula and Mab are quick to see the potential in a local village spinster, Beth, whose shyness conceals a brilliant mind with puzzles, and soon Beth spreads her wings as one of the park's few female cryptanalysts. But war and loss and the impossible pressure of secrecy will tear the three apart. 1947. As the royal wedding of Princess Elizabeth and Prince Philip whips post-war Britain into fever, three friends turned enemies are reunited by a mysterious encrypted letter, the key to which lies buried in a long ago betrayal that destroyed their friendship and left one of them confined to an asylum. A mysterious traitor has emerged from the shadows of the Bletchley Park past, and now Ursula, Mab, and Beth must resurrect their old alliance and crack one last code together. But each petal they remove from the Rose Code brings danger and their true enemy closer. Our third genre this month is science fiction. A Distillation Called Peace by Arkady Martine. An alien armada lurks on the edges of Texaconly space. No one can communicate it, and no one can destroy it. And the fleet captain, Nine Hibiscus, is running out of options. In a desperate attempt at diplomacy with the mysterious invaders, the fleet captain has sent for a diplomatic envoy. Now Marat and three, still railing from the recent upheaval in the empire, face the impossible task of trying to communicate with the hostile entity. Their failure will guarantee millions of deaths lost in an endless war. Their success might prevent Texarkana's destruction and allow the empire to continue its expansion, or it might create something far stranger. One Day, All of This Will Be Yours by Adrian Tazbaski. Welcome to the end of time. It's a perfect day. Nobody remembers how the casualty war started. Really? There's no one around to remember, and nothing for them to remember, if there were. That's sort of the point. We were time warriors and we broke time. I was the one who ended the fighting, tidied up the damage as much as I could. And then I came here to the end of it all and gave myself a mission to never let it happen again. Our fourth genre of the month is fantasy. The Bowmaker by Sarah Beth Durst. 25 years ago, 5 heroes risked their lives to defeat the Bowmaker Urkla, a corrupt magician who created an inhuman army using animal bones. But victory came at a tragic price. Only 4 of the heroes survived. Since then, Kara, the group leader, has exiled herself to a remote tower and devoted herself to one purpose: resurrecting her dead husband. But such a task requires both a cachet of human bones and a sacrifice. For each day he lives, she will live one less. She'd rather live 1 year with her husband than without him. But using human bones for magic is illegal in Voss. The dead are burned, as are any bone workers who violate the law. Yet Kira knows that where she can find the bones she needs, the battlefield where her husband and countless others lost their lives. But defying the laws of the land exposes a terrible possibility. Maybe the dead don't rest in peace after all. 5 warriors, one broken, one gone soft, one pursuing a simple life, one stuck in the past, and one who should be dead. Their story should have been finished, but evil doesn't stop just because one said the end. The Conductors by Nicole Grover. Hetty Rhodes and her husband Benji were conductors on the Underground Railroad, ferrying dozens of slaves to freedom with daring, cunning, and magic that draws its powers from the constellations. With the war over, those skills find new purpose as they solve mysteries and murders that white authorities would otherwise ignore. In the heart of Philadelphia's 7th Ward, everyone knows that when there's a strange death or magical curses causing trouble, Hetty and Benji are the only ones that can solve the case. But when an old friend is murdered, their investigation stirs up a wasp nest of intrigue, lies, and long buried secrets in a mystery unlike anything they handled before. With a clever, cold blooded killer on the prowl, testing their magic and placing their lives at risk, Hetty and Benji will discover how little they really know about their neighbors and themselves. The Counselor by E.J. Beaton. When the death of Iron Queen Sarah Lynn Brave fractures the realm of Alara, Lysandre Prior, the palace scholar and the queen's closest friend, is appointed counselor. Publicly, Lysandra must choose the next monarch from amongst the city rulers vying for the throne. Privately, she seeks to discover which ruler murdered the queen, suspecting the use of magic. Resourceful, analytical, and quiet, Lysandra appears to embody the model she was raised with, everything in its place. Yet, while she hides her drug addiction from her new associates, she cannot hide her growing interest in power. She becomes locked in a game of strategy with the city rulers, especially the Prince Luca, who seems to shift between ally and rival. Further from home, an old enemy is stirring. The magic wailing White Queen is on the move again, and her alliance with a traitor among the royal family poses a danger not just to the peace of the realm, but to the survival of everything Lysandra cares about. All the Murmuring Bones by A.G. Slatter. Long ago, Miriam O'Malley's family prospered due to a deal struck with the Murrah, safety for their ships in return for a child of each generation. But for many years, the family has been unable to keep their side of the bargain and have fallen into decline. Marin's grandmother is determined to restore their glory, even at the price of Marin's freedom. A spellbinding tale of dark family secrets, magic and wishes, and creatures of myth and sea, of strong women and men who seek to control them. Our fifth genre this month is ghost fiction. The Whispering House by Elizabeth Brooks. Freya is struggling to move on from her sister Stella's death 5 years ago. Visiting the bewitching Bryn Hall, only a few miles from the scene of the tragedy, she discovers a portrait of Stella, a portrait she had no idea existed, in a house Stella never set foot in, or so she thought. Driven to find out more about her sister's secrets, Freya is drawn into the world of Briar Hall and its owners, artist Corey and his sinister, watchful mother. But as Freya lingers in this mysterious century-old house, her relationship with Corey crosses the line into obsession, and the darkness behind the locked doors of the estate threaten to spill out. Later by Stephen King. The son of a struggling single mother, Jamie just wants an ordinary childhood. But Jamie is no ordinary child. Born with an unnatural ability, his mom urges him to keep secret. Jamie can see what no one else can see, learn what no one else can learn. But the cost of using this ability is higher than Jamie can imagine, as he discovers when a New York PD detective draws him into pursuit of a killer who has threatened to strike from beyond the grave. Our sixth genre this month is mystery and suspense. My Friend Natalia by Laura Lindstedt. Natalia cannot stop thinking about sex. It is clear from the moment Natalia barges into a new therapist's office that she has motives beyond simply fixing her sex life. She is quick to mention that the exact same painting hanging on the therapist's wall, an abstract piece titled Her Mouth, once hung in her grandmother's living room. The comment deeply unsettles the therapist, as does the large alarm clock that Natalia brings with her, intent on timing the sessions herself, and the tape recorder. At first, Natalia seems to play along with the rules of therapy. She partakes in the therapist's pain displacement exercises, word games, and even produces a few anatomical illustrations. She muses on the art of pornography and boldly examines figures from history. By combining philosophy and literature, repressed childhood memories, and explicitly unrepressed exotic experiences, the sessions quickly shed all inhibitions. Still, the therapist can't help but wonder, what does Natalia really? Saving Grace by Debbie Babbitt. For 24 years, Mary Grace Dobbs has been searching for salvation. Orphaned at 11, she was forced to go live with her Bible salesman uncle, wheelchair-bound aunt, and a cousin who tortured and killed small animals. At school, a bully made her life a nightmare. Everything changed when a newcomer to town became her only best friend, and changed a second time when the friend and another classmate vanished 2 months later, never to be seen again. Today, Mary Grace is the first female sheriff of her town, a position that doesn't sit well with some of the locals. Keeping order and her demons at bay becomes an impossible task when the black drifter suspected in the earlier disappearances returns to repentance and another sixth grader vanishes. With old prejudice and new secrets spilling out into the open, the modern world soon illuminates the village's darkest corners. The case becomes even more fraught as cult of white supremacists brings its gospel of hate to repentance, and violence explodes, claiming more lives. Racing to find the missing girl while fearing for the safety of her own sixth grade daughter, Mary Grace must confront an unspeakable truth and face a decision no parent should ever have to make. Missing and Endangered by J.A. Jantz. When Jennifer Brady returns to Northern Arizona University for her sophomore year, she quickly becomes a big sister to her new roommate, Beth Rankin, a brilliant yet sheltered 16-year-old freshman. For a homeschooled Beth, college is her first taste of both freedom and unfettered access to the internet. And Jenny is concerned she's too naive and rebellious for her own good. Her worries are well founded because one day Beth vanishes, prompting Jenny to alert campus authorities, local police, and her mom, Sheriff Joanna Brady, who calls in a favor. Beth is found, but Jenny's concern has unwittingly put her in the crosshairs of a criminal bent on revenge. With Christmas vacation approaching and Beth at war with her parents, Jenny invites Beth to the shelter of the Brady home. While Joanna is sympathetic, she's caught up in a sensitive case, an officer involved shooting that has placed the lives of two young children in jeopardy, leaving her stretched thin to help a fragile young woman recently gone missing and endangered. Not Dark Yet by Peter Robinson. When property developer Connor Clive Bladen is found dead, Detective Chief Inspector Alan Banks and his Yorkshire team dive into the investigation. As luck would have it, someone had installed a cache of spy cams all around his luxurious home. The team hope they'll find answers and the culprit among the video recordings. Instead of discovering Connor's murder, however, the grainy and blurred footage reveals another crime, a brutal rape. If they can discover the woman's identity, it could lead to more than justice for the victim. It could change everything the police think they know about Connor and why anyone would want him dead. Meanwhile, tensions are rising between Banks and his friend Zelda, a super recognizer, able to recognize faces significantly better than most people. Zelda is determined to bring the men who abused her to justice. But stirring up murky waters of the past will put her in greater danger than ever before. And Banks worries that he won't be able to stop her from plunging too deep before it gets too deep. A Matter of Life and Death by Philip Ungolan. Joe Lattimore, homeless and trying desperately to provide for his young family, agrees to fight in a no-holds-barred illegal bout, only to have his opponent die. Lattimore now finds himself at the mercy of the fight's organizers who blackmail him into burglarizing a house. However, when he breaks in, he finds a murdered woman on the floor, and the police have received an anonymous tip naming him the murderer. Robin Lockwood, an increasingly prominent young attorney and former MMA fighter, agrees to take on his defense. But the case is seemingly airtight. The murdered woman's husband, Judge Anthony Carrasco, has an alibi, and Lattimore's fingerprints are discovered at the scene. But everything about the case is too easy, too pat, and Lockwood is convinced that her client has been framed. The only problem is that she has no way of proving it since his death case. If she fails, then another innocent will die. Our last genre for this month is nonfiction. Fans by Larry Homestead. Homestead turns his expertise to a subject that has never been fully explored, delivering highly entertaining game changer that uses brand new research to show us why being a sports fan is good for us individually and a force for a positive change in society. Fans is a passionate reminder of how games, teams, and communities dedicated to them are vital to our lives. Citing fascinating new studies on sports fandom, Olmsted makes the case that the more you identify with the sports team, the better your social, psychological, physical health is, the more meaningful your relationships are, and the more connected and happier you are. In Praise of Retreat by Kirsty McLeod. From pilgrim paths to forest cabins, and art temples to quiet havens for yoga and meditation. In Praise of Retreat explores pleasures and powers of this ancient practice for modern people. Christine draws on the history of the retreat and personal experiences to reveal many ways readers can step back from society to reconnect with their deepest selves and to their loftiest aspirations in life. Just Work by Kim Scott. We, all of us, consistently exclude, underestimate, and underutilize huge numbers of people in the workforce, even as we include, overestimate, and promote others, often beyond their level of competence. Not only is this immoral and unjust, it's bad for business. Just work is the solution. Scott reveals a practical framework for both respecting everyone's individuality and collaborating effectively. This is the essential guide leaders and their employees need to create more than just workplaces and establish new norms of collaboration and respect. Misadventure by Jess Phoenix. As a volcanologist, natural hazard expert, and founder of Blueprint Earth, Jess Phoenix has dedicated her life to scientific exploration. Her career path, hard earned in the male dominated world of science, has led her into still flowing Hawaiian lava fields, congressional races, glittering cocktail parties at Manhattan's elite Explorers Club, and numerous pairs of Caterpillar work boots. It has also inspired her to devote her life to making science more inclusive and accessible. Following Phoenix's journey from reality television sites deep in Ecuador's jungles to glaciers, university classrooms to Death Valley in summer, she has even chased down members of a Mexican cartel to retrieve a stolen favorite rock hammer. Readers will delight in her unbelievable adventures, all embarked for the love of science. A History of the Human Brain by Brett Stecker. Just 125,000 years ago, humanity was on a path to extinction until a dramatic shift occurred. We used our mental abilities to navigate new terrain and changing climates. We hunted, tracked tides, shucked oysters, anything we could do to survive. Before long, our species had pulled itself back from the brink and was on more stable ground. What saved us? The human brain in its evolutionary journey is unlike any other. By examining the history of the brain, we can begin to piece together what it truly means to be human. Zoe Bakes Cakes by Zoe Francois. Cake is the ultimate symbol of celebration, used to mark birthdays, weddings, or even just a Tuesday night. Zoe demystifies the craft of cakes through more than 85 simple and straightforward recipes. Discover treats such as coconut candy bar cake, apple cake with honey bourbon glaze, chocolate devil's food cake. With step-by-step photo guides that break down baking fundamentals like creaming butter and sugar, Zoe expert knowledge to guide you, anyone can make these delightful creations. After by Bruce Grayson. Cases of remarkable experiences on the threshold of death have been reported since ancient times and are described today by 10% of the people whose hearts stop. The medical world has generally ignored these near death experiences, dismissing them as tricks of the brain or wishful thinking. But after his patients started describing events that he could not just sweep under the rug, Dr. Bruce Grayson began to investigate. As a physician without a religious belief system, he approached near death experiences from a scientific perspective. Dr. Grayson shows how scientific revelations about dying process can support an alternate theory. Dying could be the threshold between one form of consciousness and another, not an ending, but a transition. This new perspective on the nature of death can transform the fear of dying that pervades our culture into a healthy view of it as one more milestone in the course of our lives. After challenges us to open our minds to these experiences, to what they can teach us, and in so doing, expand our understanding of consciousness and what it means to be human.